Hi, thanks so much, John and Fulani. What you just said, I didn't know the exact numbers of how many citizens have been deported into secure communities already, but it reminds me, I don't have the exact number, but if folks want to look up, I think it's A Forgotten Crime. It's a documentary about this. In the 30s, the United States went on a mass deportation effort and deported about 1 million people of Mexican descent, and I believe about 50% of them were American citizens at the time. And this does feel like a very similar moment and a very similar effort. And I gotta say, I didn't know very much about the efforts that Fulani or John had been involved in. And what I wanted to say to begin with, that one of the really stunning things about secure communities is the deafening silence with which it is being greeted. These efforts notwithstanding, which should be applauded all the more because they're pretty much standing on their own with maybe a few other exceptions. If you look at what secure communities is, and it is not legislation, unlike, say, the 287G program or SB 1070, it's just an executive type act. It is a stripped down, streamlined version of other boogeymen of the immigrant community, which I'll get into a little bit more soon, such as SB 1070 of Arizona, 287G. It takes out all the fluff. It gets right down to the basics. It's not requiring police to racially profile. It doesn't turn immigrants into felons. It simply creates a bridge between local law enforcement and federal immigration, which allows the government, or the governments, federal, local, and state, to behave in a far more intensive way when it comes to repressing immigrant workers and those who look like immigrant workers. If you are arrested, you can now be deported without a normal trial, without a criminal trial. That's basically the long-term effect of it. If you were not on this list, if you're on the list as an undocumented immigrant or somebody who's violated their visa or played fast and loose or made a mistake or something, you can then be detained and deported. That's what it means. And it means that the local police can pick you up, not a tiny number of immigration agents, but your own local police who you see driving around every day more and more. So the fact that there are not massive demonstrations, even student walkouts and strikes, is very interesting and telling. And I think we should be asking ourselves why that is not the case. Because if you look at the immigrant movement in this country, not going back to ancient history, just in the last 10 years, you will see that usually when this stuff happens, there is that kind of response. So when Stephanie says I'm going to go back and look at the history, I'm only going back about 7 years. I want to go back to 2005 and 2006, when the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives, well, the U.S. Senate separately passed one bill that was anti-immigrant, and the House of Representatives passed another. The one the House of Representatives passed was far more widely known. It was sponsored by Sensenbrenner, and it turned every undocumented immigrant into a felon. It put all these odious requirements on immigrants. It basically was declaring open war on immigrants. It made it a felony to help an immigrant in any way. If you were a teacher, it made it a felony to teach an undocumented immigrant. Doctor, you couldn't treat one. Social worker, so on and so forth. If you were a minister or a priest, can't let them in your congregation. So this was open war. The other bill was far more realistic. It also involved provisions for tighter enforcement of immigration law. Not as extreme, but more realistic. It called for border militarization, and most importantly, unlike the Sensenbrenner bill, it called for a guest worker program, a very large one. I believe at the time they were looking at 400,000 to begin with, which has the advantage for which employers like Walmart and Tyson Foods were very interested at the time and are still interested in passing to this day. Now you might ask, why would they want a guest worker program as opposed to just hiring undocumented immigrants? guest worker program, the undocumented immigrants have the advantage of having anonymity and being able to quit their job at one place and get a new job somewhere else. With a guest worker program, the only way you come into this country is by being sponsored by an employer. If they don't like what you do, they send you right back. And in the meantime, in getting here, you have to pay a significant amount of money to get here in the first place. So you come here in debt, usually to the tune of thousands of dollars. If your employer doesn't like you can be sent right back. And so now, you don't have the anonymity because they get you in a biometric, system and so on and so forth. And you also cannot quit your job. Now, there's problems with this, which I'll get to later, but long and the short of it was, these were the two bills that were passed in 2005 and 2006. The Sensenbrenner really caught people's attention, and it sparked a serious opposition. Now, I thought it started in Chicago, but actually the opening shot was fired by the community in Washington, D.C., with a demonstration of 50,000. This was followed, this was on March 7th. By March 10th, there was a demonstration in Chicago. It was between 200,000 and 300,000 people. And as it marched through the city, going down the west side, people walked off their factory jobs into the demonstration. In fact, the demonstration was called on a work day, and practically everybody in it, if they had a job, were skipping work to be in it. And I actually remember looking at this on the computer screen with John and other folks at Unidad Latina and Acción while we were building this anti-war demonstration. Now, biggest anti-war demonstrations at the time were about this size, but those were national demonstrations. This one was local. And it didn't stop there. The wave grew. So, in Atlanta, 70,000 workers left work to